They laughed when I walked into my brother's engagement party. They decided I did not belong there. What they did not know was that the woman they were ignoring had already recognized the bride under a different name, had already confirmed a federal investigation, and had already decided whether to walk away and let my family fall or step in and stop it. My name is Ellie Hartwell, and that night, I did not come to celebrate a marriage. I came to watch a lie collapse. Chapter 1. The Woman They Never Counted. The night of the engagement party arrived with the kind of polished confidence that only money and careful planning can buy. It was late fall of 2024, and the ballroom of the Rowan Hotel glowed with soft amber light, crystal glassware, and the low hum of people who knew how to belong in places like this. Chicago looked its best through the tall windows, clean and distant, like a city posing for someone else. I arrived a few minutes after 7, right on time, dressed simply, nothing that asked for attention. A dark dress, clean lines, no jewelry except my watch. I moved through the entrance like any other guest, my heels quiet against the marble floor. No one turned, no one smiled, no one noticed. That was familiar. This room was filled with people my family liked to impress. Insurance executives, real estate developers, friends of friends who talked about travel and property taxes with equal enthusiasm. They laughed easily, leaning into one another, comfortable in the shared assumption that they were all roughly the same kind of successful. My family blended in perfectly. They always had. Claire Whitman stood near the center of the room, tall, composed, her posture confident in the way of someone who expected the world to adjust around her. She wore a pale silk dress and a smile that never reached her eyes. Every few minutes, someone new approached her, congratulating her, touching her arm, complimenting her taste. She accepted it all with practiced warmth, her gaze moving constantly, cataloging. I stayed near the edge of the room, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching. Claire had that skill of controlling a space without raising her voice. She tilted her head when she listened, asked questions that sounded thoughtful, but revealed nothing. She was polite in a way that made people want her approval. When she finally noticed me, it was with a pause that felt deliberate. She walked over slowly, her smile softening into something more measured. She looked me up and down, not rudely, just thoroughly, then leaned in slightly as if sharing a kindness. She said something about how meaningful it was that I could be there, given how different my life had turned out. She added that evenings like this could feel overwhelming if you were not used to them. Her tone was gentle, almost considerate. The implication landed cleanly. I did not belong in rooms like this. I was a reminder of a version of the family better left unmentioned. I nodded once and said nothing. Her eyes lingered on my face, waiting for a reaction. When none came, she smiled again and excused herself, already turning toward the next guest. Around us, the party flowed on uninterrupted. My calm surprised people sometimes. I could see it in the way a few nearby guests glanced at me, then away, unsure whether they had missed something. But calm was not new to me. It was something I learned young, long before I understood its value. A server hurried past me, whispering urgently into a headset. I caught a fragment about a seating issue near the back of the room. Without thinking, I stepped aside and spoke quietly to him, pointing toward the service corridor and suggesting a quick adjustment to the floor plan. He listened, nodded, and moved quickly. A moment later, David Monroe appeared from the edge of the ballroom. He was the general manager, sharp and efficient, the kind of man who noticed everything. He met my eyes for a brief second, then addressed me with a respectful familiarity that would have meant nothing to anyone else. He thanked me and said it was already handled. No one around us paid attention. To them, it was just another minor correction in a well-run event. To me, it was confirmation of something I did not need to say out loud. This was not an unfamiliar place for me. Across the room, my brother Thomas stood near Claire, his hand resting lightly at her back. He looked comfortable, relaxed in the way of a man who had never had to fight for his position. At 41, he had built a solid, respectable life. A steady career, a clean record, a reputation for reliability. He was the safe choice, the one my parents trusted, the son who never caused concern. My mother, Margaret, hovered nearby, her expression carefully pleasant. At 67, she carried herself with the rigid grace of someone who believed appearances were a form of morality. She greeted guests warmly, laughed at the right moments, and kept a close eye on anything that might disrupt the image she had spent decades maintaining. She glanced at me once, briefly, then looked away. I had learned to not expect more. As I shifted my weight, something caught my eye. Claire turned slightly, and the light from the chandelier reflected off the necklace at her throat. A string of pearls, soft and unmistakable. I recognized them instantly. They had belonged to my grandmother, Evelyn. She gave them to me in 2009, not long before she died, pressing the small velvet box into my hands and telling me I would know when to wear them. She had said it quietly, as if it were a secret meant only for us. Seeing them there, displayed so confidently, felt like a hand closing around my chest. I did not react. I did not move. I simply watched Claire laugh at something someone said, the pearls resting perfectly on her collarbone, now serving a purpose they had never been meant for. No one noticed my stillness. No one noticed the way my fingers tightened around my glass. I took a slow breath and let it out. This was not the moment. I understood that with absolute clarity. The speeches began soon after. Thomas thanked everyone for coming, his voice steady, sincere. Claire spoke next, gracious and charming, talking about new beginnings and the importance of family. My mother dabbed at her eyes, visibly moved. Applause filled the room, smiles all around. I stood there, listening, the weight of everything settling into place. The small dismissals, the quiet exclusions, the familiar pattern of being present but never included. And beneath it all, something else, something colder and more precise. This evening was not just a celebration, it was a transaction wrapped in silk and champagne. I could feel it in the way conversations bent around money and opportunity, in the way certain questions were asked and others carefully avoided. I had spent years learning how to read rooms like this, how to see what people were selling without realizing it. As the music swelled and guests began to move toward the dance floor, I stepped back, letting the crowd pass around me. I watched Claire, watched my family, watched the way the pieces aligned. For the first time that night, I was no longer just enduring. I was paying attention, and I understood that whatever this was, it was only beginning.
Chapter 2. Blood doesn't always mean family. My mother moved through the ballroom like the room had been built for her, not with money, but with certainty. Margaret Hartwell had spent decades mastering that certainty, the kind that makes strangers assume you must belong wherever you stand. She went straight to Claire Wigman and began fixing her as if Claire were part of the decor. My mother smoothed the silk at her waist, adjusted a loose strand of hair, then lifted her hands to the pearls. She centered the necklace carefully, fingers lingering just long enough to turn the moment into a quiet display of approval. Claire stayed still, smiling, accepting the attention as if it were something she had always deserved. I stood a few steps away, close enough to see every detail and far enough to be treated like background. When my mother finally noticed me watching, her face did not change, only her eyes sharpened, that familiar look she used when she wanted control without witnesses. She stepped closer and spoke softly, sweet enough to sound like concern. She said she needed tonight to stay easy, She said there were a lot of people here. She said she could not deal with anything awkward. Then she said the line she had used on me my entire life. Do not make things difficult. I nodded once. My body responded before my thoughts had time to argue. She patted my arm, affectionate from a distance, and turned back to Claire. To everyone else, it looked like a mother guiding her daughter. To me, it felt like instruction. I slipped into the hallway outside the ballroom to breathe. The Rowan Hotel smelled exactly the way I had designed it to smell after dark. Clean citrus, warm wood, calm without being obvious. People always said the place felt balanced. They never knew why. I liked that. I liked quiet control because I had not grown up with it. And like always, the moment my mother used that tone, my mind went backward. Cedar Falls, Iowa, 2006. I was 18, leaving with a duffel bag and a plan built mostly on stubbornness. Community college was what I could afford, so I went. I told myself it counted as a beginning. When I told my parents I was leaving, my mother did not cry. She looked at me like I had chosen inconvenience on purpose. She asked where I thought I was going. She asked how I planned to pay for it. She asked why I could not just be sensible like Thomas. My father stood behind her, quiet, hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor. Robert Hartwell was not cruel. He was just absent, even when he was right there. He did not stop her. He did not help me. He watched. I left anyway. I worked every shift I could find. Retail, reception desks, weekend catering. I learned how to stretch $20 into groceries. I learned how to smile when my feet hurt and my pride hurt worse. I got sick during my first semester and missed 2 days of class. No one from home called. Not my mother, not my father, not Thomas. They did call later, but never for me. My mother called to remind me to send Thomas a birthday card. She called to tell me he was doing well. She called to say I should be proud of him. Thomas was the story. I was the footnote. Over time, I stopped sharing, not to punish them, but to protect myself. Every time I offered something real, it became a problem to manage. My wins made them uncomfortable. My pain annoyed them. My existence disrupted the neat picture my mother preferred. That was how the lie settled in without anyone having to say it out loud. In their minds, Thomas became the steady provider, the responsible son, the one holding everything together. It was a story they liked because it made them feel respectable. It made them feel safe. I went back into the ballroom as guests rearranged for photos. My mother gathered a small group near the dance floor, people who smiled politely and asked questions meant to measure you. She lifted her glass, not for a formal toast, just enough to draw attention. She spoke warmly about family traditions. She talked about legacy. She said some things mattered more than anything money could buy. Then she reached for Claire again and touched the pearls with ceremony. She told them those pearls had been in our family for generations. She called them a symbol of Hartwell women. She said she was honored to pass them down to the woman joining our family. She said Claire would carry our legacy forward. The room responded exactly the way she expected. Smiles, approval, soft admiration. No one questioned it. My stomach went cold. My grandmother Evelyn gave me those pearls in 2009. She was thin by then, tired, but her eyes were still sharp. She pressed the velvet box into my hands and told me I would know when to wear them. She said it was quietly, like it was meant only for us. She was giving me more than jewelry. She was giving me proof that I belonged. My mother knew that. She knew exactly what Evelyn intended, and she still handed those pearls to Claire because it fit the picture better. Claire played her part perfectly. She placed a hand over the pearls as if they had always been hers. She thanked my mother sweetly. She let strangers admire her. Her eyes flicked toward me for a brief moment. I could not tell if she understood what she was taking or if she simply enjoyed winning. I kept my face calm. That calm cost me. A few minutes later, Thomas came over holding a drink he didn't seem to want. At 41, he still carried himself like someone who expected things to stay stable if he avoided conflict. He asked if I was okay, like he was checking a box. I told him I was. Relief softened his face. He said Mom had been stressed for months. He said Claire had made everything easier. He said this was good for the family. Good for the family, the oldest leash in our house. I asked him if he knew where the pearls came from. His eyes slid away toward Claire. He hesitated, then shrugged. He said Mom handled that stuff. He said it was probably not worth making a big deal. He said it was just jewelry. Just jewelry. I looked at him and felt the distance between us widen. He could say that because symbols had never been taken from him. He had never been erased. I asked him, quietly, if he really believed he was the one taking care of Mom and Dad. He frowned, confused. He said he did his part. He said he had always been there. He said he helped them out, especially after Dad retired. He spoke with the confidence of a man repeating a story he had never questioned. I did not correct him, not yet, because I knew exactly what would happen if I reached for those pearls right now. If I confronted my mother in the middle of her performance, she would turn the room against me with one sad look and one careful sentence. I would become the jealous sister, the ungrateful daughter, the woman who could not let her brother have one happy night, and Claire would become the victim. My mother trained me in narrative mechanics without meaning to. Timing mattered more than volume. You could be right and still lose if you spoke at the wrong moment. Thomas patted my arm awkwardly and walked back to Claire. I stood alone, listening to music that sounded too happy, watching my mother beam as strangers congratulated her, watching Claire accept praise like it belonged to her, watching the pearls catch the light and thinking of my grandmother's hands and that velvet box. The deepest hurt wasn't the insult, it was the erasure. I did not reach for the necklace tonight, not because I didn't want it back. I wanted it back more than I could admit, but I wanted something else first. I wanted to understand what kind of deal my mother was making in plain sight, and what she was willing to sacrifice for it. So I slipped back into the edges of the room, invisible again by design, and let my eyes do what my heart could not afford to do out loud. I stopped enduring, and I started collecting.
Chapter 3. This marriage was never about love. Once I allowed myself to look closely, the Whitmans stopped looking impressive and started looking careless. It began with something small. Richard Whitman was standing near the bar, speaking to a man I did not recognize, his voice low but not careful enough. I was close enough to hear him mention an LLC based in Arizona, something about a project waiting to clear a few issues before money could move. He laughed it off, waving his hand like it was a delay, nothing more. It did not match the story he had been selling all evening. Clean investments, conservative growth, safe returns. Men who run legitimate money do not complain about stalled projects in public, especially not in a room full of strangers. I made a note and moved on. Claire floated through group to group, always polished, always pleasant, but never saying anything specific. She talked about travel without naming places, about business without naming companies. She asked questions that invited people to talk about themselves while she revealed nothing. It was charming. It was also a shield. Her mother, Elaine, stayed close, smiling too much, touching arms, leaning in, acting warm in a way that felt practiced. Her father watched from a distance, scanning a room, measuring reactions. None of it was overtly wrong. All of it was slightly off. I had spent years learning to read patterns in rooms like this. Hospitality teaches you more than how to serve drinks and smooth linens. It teaches you who is pretending and who is prepared. Later that night, after the speeches ended and the music grew louder, I slipped into a quiet corner near the windows and took out my phone. I sent a short message to Laura Kensington. I need you to look into someone for me. Nothing official yet. Just tell me if my instincts are wrong. Laura replied a few minutes later. Send me what you have. I forwarded the name Richard Whitman, the Arizona LLC, and a brief description of the family. Then I sent a second message to Natalie Brooks, the forensic accountant I trusted when things got complicated. Can you do a quick check on an Arizona LLC tied to the Whitman family? Something feels off. Natalie responded with her usual calm efficiency. Give me an hour. I put my phone away and returned to the party, my attention sharpened now. Once you know what to look for, people start to tell you everything without realizing it. I watched Richard avoid questions about timelines. I watched Elaine deflect compliments about their success back onto Thomas and my mother. I watched Claire laugh at a joke about risk without ever committing to an opinion. At one point, Claire drifted close to me, close enough that we were briefly alone. She smiled and said it must be strange watching your family change like this. I met her eyes and said families do what they need to survive. Her smile held for a second too long. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. Natalie first. I am seeing civil filings tied to that Arizona LLC. It is not clean. There are similar structures in Illinois and Nevada. Same pattern, different names. This looks like a shell setup. My pulse stayed steady, but something inside me locked into place. Laura followed shortly after. There's a federal case open, financial crimes, started in 2022, no arrest yet. They are missing a key identity link. Names keep changing. I stepped away from the noise, my back to the windows, the city lights blurring behind me. I typed back, "What name are they looking for?" Laura sent a pause, then a reply. The current alias appears to be Claire Whitman, but that name does not have a long enough legal history. It's a cover. Natalie sent another message seconds later. Found something else. Facial recognition flagged similarities across records. Claire Whitman matches a Samantha Reed. She has changed names at least twice. I closed my eyes for a moment. Samantha Reed. The name settled with a finality that made everything else make sense. The vague answers, the shifting stories, the careful avoidance of specifics. This was not ambition. This was evasion. I stepped back into the ballroom and watched Claire again. Watched the way she touched the pearls, the way she laughed at Thomas, the way she leaned into my mother. She was not building a life. She was building cover. Laura called me a few minutes later. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "This is not a small thing," she said. "The federal case is real. They've been tracking these people for 2 years. The problem is they keep staying one step ahead by changing identities and moving money through different states." I asked her what they needed. They need confirmation, a place, a moment where everything converges, and proof that the current identity is tied to the old ones. I leaned against the wall, the sound of the party muffled behind me. I typed back, "So this marriage is not about love?" Laura said, "No, it's about legitimacy, about blending into a respectable family, about time." I ended the call and stood there, staring at the neutral artwork on the hallway wall, my thoughts moving faster than my emotions could catch up. This was bigger than a stolen heirloom, bigger than an insult, bigger than my mother choosing appearances over me. If this marriage went forward without interruption, my family would become part of the shield. They would unknowingly protect people who were already under federal investigation, and when it collapsed, it would take them down with it. I could walk away. That option sat heavy and tempting in my chest. I had spent years learning to survive without them. I did not owe them anything. They had not protected me. They erased me when it suited them. If I left tonight and said nothing, none of this would be my fault. I thought of my mother standing proudly, passing down a legacy she didn't understand. I thought of Thomas believing he was finally building something solid. I thought of my grandmother choosing me quietly, without ceremony. I could intervene, not by yelling, not by exposing everything right now, but by giving the people already watching what they needed to finish what they had started. The choice was not about revenge. It was about alignment. If I walked away, I would be doing exactly what my family had always done, avoiding discomfort, letting someone else pay the price later. I took out my phone again and typed one more message to Laura. I can give them a place and a moment. I can help connect the dots. She replied quickly, "Be careful. Once you do this, you cannot step back." I looked through the glass doors at the ballroom, at Claire laughing with my mother, at Thomas smiling beside her, unaware of how close he was to becoming collateral damage. I typed back, "I am not stepping back." I slipped my phone away and re-entered the room, my face calm, my movements measured. No one noticed anything different. That was fine. The decision had already been made.
Now it was only a matter of timing.
Chapter 4. They destroyed themselves in public. The speeches began the way they always do, polished and rehearsed, smiles stretched tight under soft lighting. Glasses clinked. People leaned forward, ready to applaud love and commitment they had already decided to believe in. I stood near the back of the ballroom, close enough to see faces clearly, far enough to stay unremarkable. My phone felt heavier in my hand than it had all night, not because of fear, but because of finality. Laura's last message sat on the screen. They are in position. Confirm when ready. I waited. Richard Whitman took the microphone first. He spoke about family values, about trust, about building something that lasts. His voice was steady. His hands did not shake. He had done this before, just not in front of people who knew his real name. Elaine followed, her voice warm and practiced. She talked about how proud she was, how love always finds a way. She dabs at the corner of her eye, and the room softens with her. Claire stepped forward last. She looked radiant, composed, perfectly at ease. The pearls rested against her throat, catching the light with every movement. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about fate. She talked about how life brings the right people together at the right time. That was when I typed my final confirmation. Now. I slipped the phone back into my clutch and lifted my eyes. The doors at the far end of the ballroom opened quietly. No shouting, no badges waved in the air, just a small group of people in plain clothes, moving with calm purpose that only looks casual to those who have never been on the wrong side of it. They did not rush the stage. They spread out first, subtle, controlled. A man in a dark suit positioned himself near Richard. A woman stepped close to Elaine. Two others moved toward Claire. For a second, no one noticed. Then one of them spoke. Samantha Reed. The name cut through the room like a dropped glass. Claire froze. Her smile did not disappear right away. It wavered, then stiffened, like a mask held in place by habit alone. She looked around, confused, offended. "I think you have the wrong person," she said. Her voice was still polite, still controlled. The woman closest to her held up a badge, low enough to avoid spectacle, high enough to remove doubt. "We do not," she said. "Samantha Reed, we need you to come with us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Phones came out before people could stop themselves. Claire laughed once, sharp and brittle. "My name is Claire Whitman," she said. "You are interrupting my engagement." The man beside Richard placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Sir, we need to speak with you as well." Elaine's face drained of color. Richard tried to smile, tried to turn it into a misunderstanding. "This is ridiculous," he said. "There must be some mistake." The agent did not argue. She did not raise her voice. "There is an open federal investigation involving multiple shell companies and identity fraud," she said. "We are here to clarify a few things." Claire's control finally cracked. "This is insane," she said, her voice rising. "You cannot do this here. Do you know who these people are?" Her words stumbled over themselves when the agent spoke again. "Samantha Reed, you have used at least 2 other legal names since 2019. We need you to step away from the microphone." The room went silent. Claire's eyes searched the crowd, landing on my mother, on Thomas, on anyone who might anchor her back into the story she had been telling. When her gaze found mine, something flickered there. Not recognition, calculation. Richard pulled his arm back, his composure breaking. "Wait," he said. "This is a private event." The agent nodded. "We will keep it professional." Elaine reached for Claire, panic finally breaking through her warmth. "This is a mistake," she said. "She's my daughter." The agent looked at her steadily. "We understand your concern, ma'am." They guided Claire away from the microphone. She resisted just enough to make it visible, her heels catching on the carpet, her breath coming faster now. "I want my lawyer." she said, her voice cracking. "This is harassment." "You will have that opportunity," the agent replied. Richard and Elaine were gently separated from the crowd. No handcuffs, no shouting, just quiet authority doing exactly what it came to do. The illusion collapsed faster than anyone could process it. Guests whispered, someone gasped, someone laughed nervously like it was still a joke that might resolve itself. My mother recovered first. She turned toward me, her face tight with disbelief and anger. "What did you do?" she hissed, low enough to keep her voice from carrying. For a heartbeat, I thought she might slap me. "This is your fault. You always do this. You always make things difficult." Before I could respond, Thomas stepped between us. "Stop," he said. His voice was not loud, but it was firm. I'd never heard that tone from him before. He looked at me then, really looked at me, his eyes finally seeing the wreckage forming where his future had been a moment ago. "You knew," he said. It was not an accusation, it was a realization. "I knew something was wrong," I said. The agents led the Whitmans toward a side exit. Claire turned once more, her face no longer polished, her eyes wild. "You think you won," she said, her voice cracking. "This is not over." I did not answer. I watched her go, watched the pearls sway against her collarbone for the last time, watched the lie walk itself out of the room. The doors closed softly behind them. The ballroom stayed frozen for several seconds, as if no one knew what to do next. Then the noise came back all at once. Questions, speculation, shock. My mother stood very still, her face pale, her mouth set in a thin line. "This is a nightmare," she said, mostly to herself. Thomas did not look away from me. "You saved us," he said quietly. I shook my head. I stopped something worse. He nodded slowly, the weight of it settling in. I did not explain myself. I did not announce anything. I did not need to. The truth had already done the work for me. As the guests began to leave in confused clusters, I stood where I was, watching the staff move smoothly into damage control, watching the room empty of pretense. Everything had fallen apart in public, and yet somehow, this was not the end. It was only the part where everyone finally saw what had been there all along.
Chapter 5. What I took back was more than jewelry. The days after the engagement did not explode the way people expect scandals to. They did not come with flashing lights or screaming headlines. They unfolded quietly through conference rooms, sealed documents, and phone calls that ended with long pauses instead of raised voices. Laura kept me informed, steady and precise as always. The federal case had been elevated. The pattern Natalie uncovered was now fully mapped. Accounts tied to the Whitman network were frozen across multiple states. Properties were flagged. Shell companies dissolved under scrutiny. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Just the slow, irreversible weight of consequence. Claire Whitman disappeared from every legal registry that mattered. Samantha Reed resurfaced everywhere she could no longer hide. I went back to work the next morning. That surprised some people who knew what had happened, but routine has always been my way of staying grounded. The Rowan Hotel opened its doors like it always did. Guests arrived with suitcases and expectations. Staff followed protocols. The world kept moving, indifferent to personal reckoning. A week later, Thomas asked if we could talk. He chose a quiet cafe near the river, a place with no history between us. He arrived early and stood when he saw me, unsure whether to hug me or keep his distance. He looked smaller than he had at the party, not physically, but like a man who had just realized how much of his life had been built on assumptions he never examined. He did not try to soften what he needed to say. "I should have listened," he said. "I should have paid attention instead of letting Mom decide what was easier." I let the silence stretch. This was his moment to sit with what he had avoided for years.
He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. His hands were steady when he opened it, but his breath was not. Inside, the pearls rested exactly as I remembered them. "I never should have let her wear these," he said. "I knew they were yours. I just did not want to be the one who made things uncomfortable." He held the box out, then placed it into my hands himself, closing my fingers around it as if he was afraid I might push it back. "I am sorry," he said. "I know that does not fix everything, but I'm done being quiet." I looked at him for a long moment, at the brother who had been protected by silence and was finally learning what that silence cost. "Thank you," I said. It was not forgiveness, it was recognition. Sometimes that has to come first. My mother did not ask to meet me, she confronted me instead, 2 weeks later after Sunday service, when she knew I would not make a scene. She did not start with an apology. She asked me if I had known about the money. I told her yes. The truth sat between us, heavy and unavoidable. Laura had walked her through the numbers already, transfers stretching from 2016 to 2024, quiet support disguised as gifts, decisions justified as family duty, all of it routed through Thomas, all of it excused as necessary. Margaret looked older in that moment than I had ever seen her. Not frail, just stripped of certainty. "I was trying to protect us," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "You were protecting an image, and you were willing to erase me to keep it intact." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. For the first time, there was no clean story to retreat into. "I am not cutting you out of my life," I said, "but I am not stepping back into the role you gave me either. I will not be the quiet daughter who absorbs discomfort so everyone else can feel stable." She nodded stiffly. It was not remorse, it was acknowledgement. With my mother, that was as close as it came. I left with the pearls in my bag and boundaries in place. Healing, I learned, does not mean reconciliation. It means clarity. It means choosing what you will carry forward and what you will finally set down. A month later, I attended a scholarship luncheon hosted by Hartwell Hospitality Group. It was small and intentional, the kind of event that didn't need spectacle, just students, mentors, and conversations that mattered. That's where I met Lily Grant. She was 20, nervous, bright, studying hospitality management with a focus on sustainable operations. She told me she almost did not apply for the scholarship, convinced she wouldn't be chosen. "I didn't think people like me got chances like this," she said, twisting her napkin in her hands. I recognized that feeling immediately. I'd lived inside it for years. "You earned it," I told her, "and you belong here." She smiled, tentative but real, and started talking about her plans, about building places that treated people well without cutting corners, about doing things the right way even when it took longer. Listening to her, I felt something shift inside me. The past didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. It stopped being the lens through which I measured everything else. That's when I understood what I'd really taken back. It was not just jewelry. It was agency. It was the right to define myself without waiting for approval. It was the freedom to choose values over appearances, truth over comfort. Power, I learned, does not come from being recognized. It comes from refusing to let anyone else decide your worth. I wear the pearls now sometimes, not to make a statement, not for display. I wear them when I need the reminder of who chose me first and why that choice mattered. My life is quieter now, clearer. My family is still complicated. Some wounds remain open, but they are no longer bleeding. That's enough. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. And if any part of it felt familiar, if you've ever been the one overlooked, erased, or underestimated, I hope you take this with you. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. You do not have to be chosen to matter. And if you want to share your own story, I'm listening.